Most insane punishments used during ancient Greek times. There's more than one way to skin a cat, as the saying goes. But what about skinning a human? Sounds terrifying. Interestingly, the human mind has long been capable of concocting new and horrifying ways to punish supposed transgressors, baddies, and anybody else who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Hello friends, if you often fantasize about the past and really want to know the history of ancient civilizations, then you're at the right place. Welcome to Unthinkable Past, a channel better known for dishing up the outlandish ancient traditions of all times. Today we'll be speaking of the most insane punishments used during ancient Greek times, so better buckle up and let's binge history together. Athenian Socrates, arguably the most famous figure of ancient Greece, was executed at an older age by being forced to consume hemlock. This type of indirect execution was typical of the capital punishment dished out to the Greek citizens. They could be banished into a wilderness to die of exposure, or tossed down to a chasm to die of their injuries, and much more. It turns out that in the ancient world, there were quite a variety of ways to execute condemned men and women. Here we're going to take a look at some of the most macabre methods for dispatching people in antiquity. Getting started with the Brazen Bull. Phalaris, the tyrant of Agracchus in Sicily, was gifted with a device designed by the Attic sculptor Paralos in the 6th century BC. Named the Brazen Bull, it was entirely made of bronze and the size of a genuine bull. The condemned would be placed inside the hollow bowl through a small door at the back. Then a massive fire would be kindled beneath, and the poor individual would be slowly roasted alive. The Brazen Bull also had a system of pipes inside that translated the burning convict screams into mooing from the bull's mouth. How cruel. Even the infamously brutal dictator Phalaris was taken back by the gadget and decided to put it to the test by throwing its designer inside the bull. Interestingly, Phalaris is said to have likely died in the same bronze bull. The punishment of the sack, or poena coeli, was another oddly specific form of execution back then. It was employed in ancient Greece to punish parricide, the murder of one's parents or another close family member. The condemned was stuffed inside a leather sack, together by a dog, a monkey, a snake, and a rooster. The whole bag was then thrown into a body of water. If the alleged murderer wasn't killed by the animals, drowning surely would. Pouring molten metal down the throat. Yeah, you heard it right. Those found guilty of incest and adultery with the married daughter of a priesthood member were burned, but not from the outside. First, the convicted criminal would be strangled with a rope by two key witnesses in the case. It used to be a soft rope since it was seen as more compassionate, not to create additional pain with coarse material. When the convict's strangulation led him to gasp for air, molten lead was poured down his throat. Another insane practice was flaying. It basically involved the removal of the victim's skin, usually by making him incisions with a knife in the victim's legs, buttocks, and torso, and then removing the skin as intact as possible. Flaying a person alive has been used as a means of execution for many years in different parts of the world, including ancient Greece and Rome, medieval England, and the Ottoman Empire. Rebel leaders were especially flayed. The practice was evidently a source of pride for the empire, representing the subjugation of an enemy. Moreover, elements such as salt were sometimes used to heighten the convict's suffering while they bled to death. Getting towards the Catherine wheel, also known as the breaking wheel. Much of what we know about the Saint Catherine of Alexandria today is that of mythology, but for the thousands who were tortured on her wooden namesake during the Middle Ages, her legacy was a cruel reality. Originating in ancient Greece, this breaking wheel was crude yet effective torture device used for over 3,000 years for interrogation or general brutality. In most cases, a convict would be placed on the wheel, and his or her limbs would be beaten with a cudgel through the spokes. An executed body, on the other hand, might simply be displayed on the wheel as a cautionary tableau. The torture sessions were so horrible, sometimes extending over days, that an executioner would periodically execute a deliberately lethal stroke, termed in French as a coup de grace, or blow of mercy. Many European countries also went on to adopt it during the Middle Ages. Moving on to Strappado. It was an unpleasant kind of torture that, unlike many others on this list, didn't necessarily end in death. The guilty party was strung up by the wrists behind the head in Strappado. The unnatural angle almost guarantees an agonizing shoulder dislocation, but if it doesn't, weights could be added. Strappado is thought to have started during the Inquisition in medieval times, but it's been employed in some way or the other until the early 21st century. Let's now talk about rat torture. That appears to have survived in the minds of creative folks, as it was recently included in Too Fast, Too Furious and Game of Thrones. A hungry or ill rat is placed in a bucket on the convict's exposed stomach or chest in this terrible, and I must say creative mode of torture. The bucket is then heated from the outside, and the agitated rat nibbles its way through the unlucky person's flesh, as well as any organs it comes across on its way out. Another gruesome practice to include is boiling alive. It was a common method of execution from centuries ago. The condemned were stripped and placed in a vat or pot of boiling liquid, which is commonly water, oil, or tar. Alternatively, for a more gruesome experience, the offender could be immersed in cold liquid before being heated to boiling. According to the records, some people were cooked up to 2 hours before they finally died. Gridiron is next on the list. The gridiron was basically a grill for roasting humans. It resembled an iron grid and was put over a fire or burning coals, as one might anticipate. To guarantee appropriate boiling, some folks were even basted in oil first. But don't you guys worry, they weren't consumed afterwards. Probably. Coming to scaphism, the worst skin-crawling methods of torture. The accused were confined between two boats or in a hollowed out tree trunk and force-fed milk and honey. Doesn't seem that bad so far, right? However, the milk and honey diet finally resulted in severe diarrhea that remained within the wooden enclosure. The poor victim was then slathered with extra milk and honey and placed in the sun or near still water, where bugs could be drawn to the filth, rot, and sweetness. The individual would inevitably die of either thirst, exposure, or bite and sting wounds. Let's now have a look at the upright jerker, an interesting twist on a classic execution method. While hanging's been a true staple all over the world, its effectiveness leaves much to be desired. It can be a very slow or awkward way to die, depending on the weight of the body, rope, trapdoor, and several other factors. So, what's the natural solution? Just do it backwards, or reverse the process in other words. The upright jerker was a modified hanging mechanism that jerked the condemned into the air using heavy weights and pulleys. It was hoped that this would be a more effective means of immediately breaking the neck, but it didn't always go as expected. Finally, the blood eagle. Coming straight out of the legends of ancient Greece, where the condemned were slashed into the back to provide access to the ribs, which were then fractured and twisted upward to resemble wings. To make matters much worse, salt was poured into the wound. Finally, the lungs were pulled out and placed over the rib wings for effect. Thankfully, there's a debate about whether or not this practice actually existed, or if it's just the word of a legend. In any case, it's so terrifying that someone actually took the time to think this up. Well, there you have it. We hope you liked this video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel without any delays. Make sure you turn on the post notifications and also let us know in the comments section about your views on these insane punishments used during the ancient Greek times. Which one do you find the most insane? Thank you for watching Unthinkable Past. Until the next time we meet, continue learning and stay healthy. Ciao.